2 men shot and killed by police in the same city with the same police agency and the same DA investigating. One happened a few weeks ago, and we already have a huge timeline with a bunch of evidence from police. The other happened almost a year ago, and we've got next to nothing. So why is there such a big difference here? And why are local school board races becoming so intense and hyper-partisan these days? Well, a lot of it has to do with a sort of boogeyman curriculum called critical race theory. And I've got some good news. You can now easily get a vaccine appointment. And some bad news, because it appears that's because a lot of people just don't want the shot. Here's the story.
And that makes the good news that I'm about to tell you even more interesting and confusing. Makes you ponder things. You know, before we get into the big story tonight, I want to mention something. It was breaking news a few minutes ago. All 15 Oregon counties that are in extreme risk right now are moving back to high risk starting on Friday. The governor made that announcement just in the last hour. So that means what? That means indoor dining can open back up. That means gyms can open back up. I can get my pump on again. Other places can have higher capacity limits that were taken away when they went into extreme risk. And this includes Multnomah and Clackamas counties. So that's a lot of businesses and a lot of people. This is exciting news. I think this is supposed to be the fun part of the roller coaster. If you were wondering why the abrupt change all of a sudden, well, it's because the state is slightly below our metric for hospitalizations, the same metric we were slightly above to close everything down. I get it. I know. You probably have questions about all of this. Open businesses, close businesses, open them again, close them again. Send me your questions. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook and Instagram. We're on there. You can use Twitter as well and the hashtag HeyDan. In the meantime, after this newscast, after the story at 6:30, we're going to have a lot more on the ins and outs of what was announced today. You can also find it at kgw.com. But for now, let's get to the big story. Now, we spend a lot of time covering police shootings, and for good reason. Over the past year, we've seen growing calls for police accountability, and that includes quickly releasing details, data, things that we should know about what happened. The public demands it. That transparency can help build trust, but not every case is treated equally. For example, days after Portland police shot and killed a man in Lents Park, investigators, they released all kinds of details and all kinds of photos. Compare that with the case of Israel Berry, where police have released very little. After nearly 1 year, the case is still a mystery. And as investigative reporter Kyla Boshi found out, some witnesses have never even been called to testify.
May 31st, 2020, a Gresham police officer shot and killed 49-year-old Israel Berry in southeast Portland.
Copy, expired at 12405 Southeast Cali Street.
Nearly 1 year later, a witness to that deadly police shooting wonders why the public has been left in the dark. Police have released few details, and the officer is still on paid leave.
It's awful. It's something I think about every day for 11 months and wonder that exact question, why?
Witness Julie Goss believes the shooting death of Israel Berry raises serious questions about transparency and police accountability. Over the past year, there's been mounting pressure nationwide on officials to quickly release details about police shootings, along with demands for a swift, independent review.
Have you ever been called to testify before a grand jury or anyone else?
No, I'm waiting to hear from them.
To date, police have released just a few sentences describing the deadly shooting. At about 9:35 p.m., a Gresham officer and several Portland Police Bureau officers responded to a call of a disturbance in the 12400 block of Southeast Kelly Street involving a white male adult who was making threats. Dispatch audio suggests there'd been some type of dispute over a phone.
It looks like this is a known subject to our caller. We had a call about him earlier where he stole her phone.
Julie Goss, who lived down the street, said when police arrived, officers blocked Berry's car.
They rode up, blocked him in. The 4 officers jumped out of their cars, immediately got into a shooting stance and opened fire, and he was shot 5 times through his windshield.
Goss said Berry's car didn't move and the officers were not at risk of being run over. She questions why the Gresham officer pulled the trigger.
Was there any sign of a weapon?
No.
No gun.
No gun. I didn't see any weapon.
KGW's request for police records has been denied. The city of Portland, which is handling the investigation, claims they've been withheld because the records are being used for criminal law purposes, open investigation, or enforcement.
We just want to know what happened. We just want some kind of answer.
Taylor Phillips, a friend of Israel Berry, believes this case is being treated differently. The investigation has dragged on much longer than most, and some details normally released have been withheld. For example, last month, a Portland police officer shot and killed Robert Delgado in Lents Park. Within days of that deadly encounter, investigators released photos, a detailed narrative, and audio of police dispatch. In Israel Berry's case, there's been silence for nearly a year.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. And Kyle, I guess my first reaction to that is I'm thinking about this witness, just imagining that as time goes by, 11 months now, the details of what happened are going to get hazier and hazier in her mind.
You're right. I mean, if you're a police officer or a prosecutor, you'd like to sit that person down as soon as possible to see what they remember while it's fresh in their mind. Now, she says, yes, this happened 11 months ago, but it's vivid. This was a traumatic moment in her life, and she remembers every single detail. Additionally, keep in mind, oftentimes in court proceedings, witnesses are called many times, years and years and years after an event to recall exactly what happened.
Got it. All right. Well, Kyle Aboshi, thank you for this follow-up tonight.
Now, another one of the differences between those two cases, those two shootings, is the use of the Attorney General. Now, last week, shortly after the shooting in Lents Park, we reported this. Multnomah County DA, Oregon AG will work together to investigate fatal police shooting. This is a partnership that I've been seeing more and more when police shoot and kill someone. And I've been wondering exactly why. We just got this news release, actually, yesterday evening. This is from Washington County. The DA there requested a partnership with the AG after Tigard police shot and killed a guy in January. So what exactly does this partnership accomplish? When Kyle and I spoke earlier, I asked him about this. Here's how Kyle explained it to me then.
I think you have to look back historically at how things have worked. So oftentimes after a police shooting, police provide that investigation to the DA's office. The DA takes it to a grand jury for review, whether there's any criminal wrongdoing on behalf of the police agency. Now, within the community, that's created some real friction here, and potential conflict of interest is the concern here, that you've got a prosecutor that relies on a police agency to investigate crimes, and now suddenly they're turning the tables and looking at police and whether they did something wrong and should be charged with the crime. So by bringing in an outside agency like the Attorney General, you've got an outside independent view. And so you have this separation, so potentially not as great a conflict of interest.
Now let's stay on this topic for just a moment, because I also got this tweet last night during the show. Someone named Pro-Vaccine Anti-Nazi MD asked me, "Hey Dan, can you please address the shootings of the two young black men in Vancouver by Clark County sheriffs, because that information is also not being shared?" Thank you for the question, Doctor. Now, let's talk about what we know about those two cases, and a warning that some of you might find this next bit of video a little difficult to watch. First is the case with Kevin Peterson Jr. and the shooting that happened in November in Hazel Dell. Police released this video of the moments leading up to his death. You can see him running and falling and then pointing something which police say was a gun. It's important to note that the video doesn't really describe whether or not Peterson was falling because he was shot or because he was falling. Maybe he tripped. We don't know. We know that Peterson was caught in a drug sting where he was selling Xanax. We know that he had a .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol, that he ran from officers, that he ignored commands. We know that deputies say he fired at them, but an independent investigation couldn't find any evidence of that. We know deputies fired 34 rounds and hit him 4 times. And we know that the case is currently under review by a prosecutor outside of Clark County. So we know a lot. The other person is Genoa Donald, who was shot by deputies during a traffic stop in Hazel Dell in February. More than 1,000 pages of documents and transcripts and pictures from the scene were given to an independent review team led by the Vancouver Police Department. We know that deputies got a call that night about a drug house and a suspicious cars driving around. We know police pulled Donald over for a minor infraction, and the report said Donald wasn't listening to commands, that there was a struggle in the vehicle, and that a deputy fired after Donald turned on the car and the car lurched forward. We know that Donald didn't have any weapons, no gun, no knife, nothing like that, but there was a screwdriver in the center console. This case will also go to another district attorney outside of Clark County for review. So despite the tweet that I got, we do know a fair amount about these cases. In fact, my reports right now are only kind of a summary of the details that have been released. We'll continue to follow all of these investigations. If you have any questions, please let me know. Now, maybe it's all the leftover energy from last year's elections. I'm not sure. But these school board elections are heating up. Okay, we started talking about this a little bit last week when protesters and counter-protesters showed up to a school board meeting in Beaverton, and some people brought guns. So, yeah, I would say they're heating up. After our story aired, a lot of you emailed us about some of the school board races in your community that you're concerned about, and we're looking into them. But for tonight, we want to zero in on an issue that seems to be a flashpoint for these school board elections, not just here in the Northwest, but really across the country. We're talking about critical race theory. Let's start with what it is. Critical race theory isn't new, although a lot of you probably have just recently heard about it in the last year. It is a framework that's been around since the 1970s. It's meant to examine the way policies and law perpetuate systemic racism. It says that racism is woven into the fabric of our nation's history, not just by individual bad actors. Here's how Randy Blazak, chair of the Coalition Against Hate Crimes, explains it.
And all critical race theory is doing is trying to acknowledge how deeply woven ideologies related to race are in our systems. You know, how we are all learning white supremacy, even if we're not Klan members and neo-Nazis. We're learning messages about white supremacy. The way that we teach history, you know, when we think of world history, it's European history. We're not learning the history of China, the history of the Southern Hemisphere. So we see everything through a very European lens. When we talk about sort of our great thinkers and great inventors, we focus on the white people and miss a lot of the people of color.
A lot of people are critical of this approach. A lot of people are critical of critical race theory. We saw in Beaverton's school board election, candidate Jeanette Shada called it Marxist Black Lives Matter materials. She and her political action group funding her campaign says that CRT is alarming.
Critical race theory is one such political ideology which is racist.
I think critical race theory is racist. I urge everyone to dig into it and make their own minds about it and think for themselves and decide if they think it's racist or not. I believe it's racist because it's race-based. But the curriculum that's critical race theory, I think, is in many ways very alarming. And from my perspective, it just goes away from the civil rights movement of the 60s where we were all equal.
Critical race theory has become a rallying point for some conservatives, a sort of cultural war across America. Today in Oklahoma, the Republican-controlled House voted that teachers there won't be allowed to teach certain concepts dealing with race and racism. In Missouri, lawmakers are pushing to ban it, saying it can make children feel bad about being white. But it's important to note that critical race theory isn't a set curriculum given to schools. It's a framework, a way of looking at issues.
There is this lack of understanding about what it means to teach about race, and a very clear example of what we would call white fragility among white people who are very defensive that we dare take on these issues, including in the classroom. And that's the argument is that's the best place to take it on. You know, let's talk about how Columbus did not discover America. There were already people in those places that didn't need to be discovered. Or let's talk about how, you know, we conquered the West, and a lot of that was through genocidal violence against Native people. Or let's talk about how racism didn't end the day that slavery was abolished. You know, we have to have those conversations, and there is a lot of pushback among people. And these are white people who would never consider themselves to be white supremacists, but who really feel like their way of looking at the world is being turned upside down.
We're going to continue to talk to the candidates and to get their takes on this, but we want to know what you think, of course, as we always do. So please reach out, use the hashtag HeyDan, and let us know. All right, why don't we count some vaccines? So we like to do this every night, give everybody an idea of where we stand right now. These are the numbers in Oregon. So as of right now, we have 1.93 million, almost 2 million people with the first dose, at least the first dose of the vaccine here in the state of Oregon, which gets us to nearly 46%. So 45.9% of people with one dose of the vaccine in Oregon. In Washington, doing pretty well also. Their numbers 3.6 million people there, 47.8% of their population with at least the first shot. Now, if you're still looking for a vaccine, good news. They're getting easier and easier to get. If you're in the Portland area, you can now schedule your appointment at the Oregon Convention Center right now. Hop on, pull out your phone while you're watching the show and get one. You don't have to wait for an invitation anymore. Just go to all4oregon.org and schedule your shot there. We checked earlier today. There are appointments available for tomorrow and the rest of the week. Now, you might be thinking, what happened to all those long wait times? I mean, you remember not long ago on this show, we were talking about how it was impossible to get an appointment. Well, now you can get them right away. What's the deal? Well, vaccine demand is dropping. It's going down. This is happening nationwide, and it's happening here in Oregon. The Oregon National Guard says that they have plenty of doses at the state fairgrounds, but not enough people coming to get those shots. And some rural counties are even turning away their allotted doses, saying the demand isn't there. We don't need any more. If you need some mathematical evidence, here's a look at a graph showing daily vaccinations in Oregon. They were climbing steadily each day until mid-April or so, when we started to see the drop happen. And we're still seeing that drop. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, that's because so many of us have been vaccinated already. So there's not as many people who need their shots. Makes sense. Well, let me remind you, we haven't even hit the 50% population with the one dose. We just showed you those numbers. So that means there are still 2 million more people in Oregon who haven't been vaccinated at all. Of course, there are a lot of kids under 16 in that number as well, but you get my point. Lots of people still need to get the shot. Let's take a look at Washington's daily vaccine chart. They kind of plateaued in April. You can see a bit of downturn in the gray area at the end of the chart. But those are doses from the past week, and the Department of Health says those numbers might not be complete. So they could increase. We'll see. We're going to keep an eye on all of it, but these are the latest numbers.
You might not know this, but the first faculty strike ever at a public Oregon university just ended. But just because they have a deal doesn't mean everything is peachy keen at the school.
I think it is a black eye for the university. Now, black eyes can heal.
And remember when we told you about Portland's homeless community getting paid to pick up trash? Well, now they're planting trees, too.
The homeless are still citizens, and that many of us want to be active and good citizens.
When the story continues.
Welcome back. I want you to know if you ever miss one of our shows, or if you're just not around a TV, maybe you're only on your phone, you're looking for it, you can find all of our episodes on our KGW YouTube channel. We also post segments on Instagram every night. You can find links to the live streams on my Facebook page. You can follow us on Instagram for The Story at The Story KGW. Lots of ways to watch the show. If you ever have any questions, just reach out and ask me, and we'll send you a link. In fact, we got a lot of emails about this next story. For the first time in Oregon's history, faculty at a public university went on strike. It happened at OIT, the Oregon Institute of Technology. The strike lasted more than a week, and this came after contract negotiations lasted, wait for it, more than 500 days. It's a lot of days. But early this morning, the standoff came to an end. They've got a deal. There's a lot of relief at Oregon Tech today. Still, though, we heard from several students and staff members, people who are a little worried about where the school goes from here. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Here we go, everybody, here we go, here we go, here we go, yeah, 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 yeah.
After 8 days on strike and more than 500 days of negotiations, the union representing faculty at the Oregon Institute of Technology struck a tentative deal with the university.
Thrilled that we've got a tentative agreement.
KGW received word around 1 a.m. Tuesday from OIT's Vice President for Institutional Advancement, Ken Fincher.
How relieved is everyone?
Oh, tremendously.
The contract lasts through June 2025 and still needs to be ratified by the union, the OIT chapter of the American Association of University Professors. Assuming they approve it, Oregon Tech says faculty will be guaranteed an 11.5% salary increase spread out over the course of the contract, plus opportunities for extra merit-based raises. They'll also have clearly defined workload requirements. That was a key issue for the union, who said instructors are expected to teach and shoulder extra responsibilities like building new curricula. How much extra work was never specified, says Union Secretary Kari Lundgren.
Sometimes there's just like well, I'm not entirely sure how much I should do, so I'll just keep saying yes to everything. And then you get, of course, terrible burnout.
Tuesday, she said that is what this new contract aims to fix.
I would call it not just a win for the union, I'd call it a win-win. I mean, ultimately, the university will benefit from.
That said, no one can pretend this didn't happen.
What's taken 500 days?
This is a tricky question to answer.
OIT's strike was historic for several reasons. On top of the roughly year and a half of negotiations, this contract is the first ever drawn up between Oregon Tech and its faculty union, which just organized in 2018. In short, both sides had a lot of ground to cover.
Whose university? Our university!
This was also the first faculty strike ever at a public university in Oregon. Others have reportedly come close, but no school, no employer wants images like this going public. Same goes for images like this.
This is our class currently with no adjunct faculty.
In the last week, OIT students have become increasingly vocal on social media. Most support the faculty and are angry that classes continued through the strike with outside instructors brought in, many of whom taught remotely.
Now, all of a sudden, I'm learning that our professors aren't being paid good and they're really angry.
Freshman Michael Crahall said even with a deal reached, some classmates have soured on Oregon Tech.
I've seen some students that have already said, oh, I'm not going to come here next year. I am transferring.
And for incoming freshmen who look up the school online, there's a record of this rift. Someone took to Google Maps and marked an intersection on OIT's Klamath Falls campus, Solidarity Corner. Click on it and you'll find photos of the picket line. That in mind, we had a question for both sides.
Is this a black eye for the university?
First up, Oregon Tech.
Oregon Tech is resilient. We were resilient through the pandemic, and we maintained our admissions, our level of enrollment. We know that our graduates, when they walk off the stage, their average salary income is around $65,000, and we're not going to let anything stop us.
Here's the union's answer.
I think it is a black eye for the university. Now, black eyes can heal. Faculty feel extremely insulted, hurt, burnt out. I hope the university and the senior administration really reaches out and sort of tries to move forward.
Oregon Tech faculty are expected to be back in class Wednesday. Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
Let's talk solutions now. You might remember a couple of weeks ago when we told you, this thing working? This thing, sometimes it just doesn't work. And if you ever see me I got it, guys. If you ever just see me staring like a deer in headlights at the camera, that's usually why. So I'll go back a couple of weeks ago when we told you about this new program that pays homeless people $20 an hour to pick up trash in the city. It was a partnership between the city of Portland and a non-profit group called Ground Score Association. Well, we learned that same organization now has another new initiative that they're doing. They're paying homeless people this time to plant trees to help restore the bioswale at the east end of the Morrison Bridge. The camp and the garbage down there in that area have caused some real environmental damage, so they're working to fix that. Like the trash program, homeless people get $20 an hour to do this work, and it's a way for them to get job opportunities in the future to help them build a resume.
It's a wonderful program because what it does is it gives people like me who, I always worked hard because I pick up cans of bottles, but it gave me a structured job again after many years. And it's good to know you have to show up at a certain time and a certain day, and responsibility is a good thing. I hope what they see is that, there are, that the homeless are still citizens, and that many of us want to be active and good citizens, and that this is a great way for us to do that, to beautify the area, and to show people that we can keep it clean without garbage everywhere and stuff like that.
Now, this is being funded by the Central East Side Industrial Council, and they have committed to supporting this program for 2 years. So they're going to be doing this work for a while. The city's Bureau of Environmental Services is also supplying the trees and the materials. Keep your questions coming and your comments and your concerns. Send them to the story at kgw.com or use that hashtag HeyDan. We're going to finish things up right after this. I was told we're already out of time before I even start talking right now, so I'll have to be very brief. Got a lot of questions about critical race theory. Keep those coming. A lot of questions, too, about the vaccine count and getting a vaccine. Some person, Helen, writing in, are they available in the evenings and on the weekends? Hop on the website. You can find appointments right now that fit your schedule. So get on there now. The vaccine appointments are available. So if you're waiting to get the vaccine, wait no longer. Hop on and get it. Thanks for watching us tonight. That's the story. We'll see you back here tomorrow.